You've been looking for a build that's going to have a lot of damage and be one of the best support DPS builds in the game. You might have found it right here. This thing is not only going to help you amplify your damage, and you'll start to see those numbers increase as I start to proc things, but it's also going to help amplify your teammates' damage. And that's what's so cool about this. And if your team decides to spec around you, they could even hit harder. But what's cool about this build is a lot of times if you're running countdown, they won't even know that you're really giving them this buff, but they will know that they are getting bleed ammo, right? That they're getting ammo that's causing bleed. So something for you guys to keep in mind when you guys are out there and you're starting to see that you're hitting harder. Maybe you got a teammate out there pushing out some damage like this to you and you have no idea. And what's great about it is you can run this with any weapon you want. Ideally, our primary will be an LMG, as you guys saw, and then our secondary will be one of the fan favorites, the Scorpio. But what we'll do here is let's get into the build and let's talk about how I have it set up, and I'll definitely show you some more gameplay as we continue to break down the build. So for this build, we are running the Black Market RPK, one of my favorite LMGs to run because it almost feels like a hybrid AK when you're handling it, right? When you're moving around with it. It has 10 expertise on here, so we're getting an additional 10% weapon damage. The cool thing about LMGs, they always come with that 12% damage targets out of cover. And then obviously I roll damage to armor as the attribute. So this is actually gonna work out really well with how I have the build set up. Now, one thing I would tell you is I was able to get 10 expertise, as I said, and on my PC account, which is only 340 shade level, about 3 weeks old, almost a month, we just hit 10 expertise. So this is something very possible, very doable, nothing too crazy with just 10 expertise. Now we go down and the talent, we're running Sadist. And what this does is it deals 20% weapon damage to bleeding enemies. Now, with this build is you want to have some amplified damage, but then you also want to have a lot of total weapon damage because that's going to help you out in the long run with amplifying that damage. We have crit chance on the scope, 20 rounds in the magazine slot. We have 5% crit damage on the underbarrel and 5% crit chance on the muzzle. And that's how I'm running it. For my secondaries, you guys saw at the end when we fought some of those hunters, we have the Scorpio, probably the number 1, number 2, number 3, probably best exotic in the game weapon wise, right? And it's because of this talent called Septic Shock. So ideally, if you guys can run that, I would run this RPK and then the Scorpio as my secondary, and then it's going to pair really well with the type of build we are running. And you might have guessed it, we are running ongoing directive. Why is this so good? Well, the 2-piece gives us 15% status effects. The 3-piece gives us that 30% reload speed, which actually helps out with LMGs because they have a slower reload speed. Now, the 4-piece is really where this shines. Rules of engagement. Shooting a status effect enemy applies a mark. Killing a marked enemy grants a full clip of hollow point ammo for your active weapons and a half a clip for the agent's active weapon to the rest of the party. So mark lasts 10 seconds. So think about that. Everybody's getting that hollow point ammo. What does it do? Well, it amplifies weapon damage by 20% and applies bleed. So I can consistently keep hollow point feeding to my teammates as long as I'm marking those enemies and killing them. And that's what's so good about this and why it works so good in group play, because you're amplifying all of your teammates' damage. So like if he has really good weapon damage, a nice solid build, he's gonna get additional 20% amplified weapon damage when he has those hollow point ammo. And then for you, you're also getting it. So that's why this is actually really good for support as a support DPS player. This is so good, and I think a lot of you guys will enjoy it. For the roles, we have weapon damage, crit chance, and a crit chance mod on here. For our second piece of ongoing directive, it's on the chest piece. We have weapon damage, crit damage, and a crit chance mod. And then look what this chest piece talent does from ongoing directive. It increases hollow point ammo weapon damage to 35%. This bonus does not apply to party members. But what's crazy about it is it works for me, right? So as the player firing, instead of that 20% amplified for the hollow points, I'm hitting harder, meaning I can kill enemies quicker, which I can keep passing hollow point ammos to my teammates where they're going to get 20% amplified weapon damage. So very, very good there, and a reason why I really love it. For our third piece of ongoing directive, it's going to be the holster. We have weapon damage and crit damage. For our fourth and final piece of ongoing directive is going to be on the knee pads, and that's going to have weapon damage, crit damage. For the gloves, I went with the contracted gloves. Now, why this is so good is it gives us 10% LMG damage, that works with the RPK, but it also has armor on here, and it has multiplicative damage of 8% damage to armor, and then we have a crit damage roll right here. Now what's cool about that is, you guys remembered we rolled damage to armor on the LMG, so we have that plus this, which is gonna add up and start seeing those higher and higher damage numbers when we're in the range or we're just out there field testing it in the open world. For our backpack, we have the Cheska backpack. Now, I decided to go with this because we get that 10% crit chance, and with LMGs, it's a little harder to get those max crit chance, especially when you don't have a lot of pieces. Roll crit chance, crit damage. We have weapon damage on here, crit damage, crit chance, and a crit damage mod. But what really sets this off is the talent on the backpack. Wicked, applying the status effect increases total weapon damage by 18% for 20 seconds. So every time I apply that status effect for 20 seconds, I'm gonna have Wicked active. And remember what I was telling you guys, we have a lot of multiplicative damage on here, and we're amplifying a lot of damage. The problem with that is if you don't have enough weapon damage, total weapon damage, you're not gonna hit as hard. So what we did is we balanced it by putting talents like this, and you're just gonna hit harder, and then like talents on the weapon that say Sadist. So if you look right here, we have 53% crit chance, 122% crit damage, 85% headshot damage, that 14% armor damage, and don't forget the 12% damage targets out of cover that's on the weapon itself. And that's why you see how much damage we can put out, because if you add on Wicked, if you add on Sadist, if you add on the buff that we get from ongoing directive, that's a lot of damage right there, right? And we're running 5 reds, 1 blue. This to me is so good. And for the skills, you can run a jammer pulse to initiate the status effect and then kill that enemy. And then you'll have obviously Wicked, you'll have the ammo, and then obviously I have like the defender drone. But skills alone, you can run whatever you want. But like I said, this build in group play is where it shines, because you're amplifying all of your teammates' damage. And not only you're hitting hard, right? Just look at the damage that we're putting out with this build, right? So if you've been looking for a support DPS that has a lot of DPS, as you guys are seeing some of the damage numbers we're doing, 100% this is the build for you. I'm sure your teammates will be very excited to see those high numbers that they're dropping, because every time you feed them those hollow point rounds, they're going to be having that amplified damage. And if you can hit hard enough to be dropping enemies quick, constantly feeds them, constantly feeds you, and it's a win-win. So if you guys have any questions on this build, let me know. Hopefully you guys enjoy this one. If you haven't been using it already, if you're new returning, you probably haven't. A lot of people really don't push this build. You see a lot of strikers, Hunter's Fury, sniper builds, status effect builds, skill builds, but stuff like this where it's just supporting your teammates a lot, not too often. And look, we also got an exotic right here. All right, guys, we're gonna wrap up the video here. I appreciate the support, appreciate the love. See you guys in the next one. Hey, nothing but skills out. Take it easy, everybody.